hope that you will enjoy it as much as I look forward to. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. C.B. Hauser, my uncle, who would come forward on the screen. We have talked and we reviewed some of our history, and what we're going to do here today is conduct what's called an interview. I am not an expert in doing this, and hopefully we can make this as comfortable as possible and as relaxed. And what we'd like to do is go through this interview with prepared questions, and then after we're done, if someone in the audience would like to ask a question of Uncle Brady, we're going to do that. So, Brady, if you have a seat here, grab my question.
Well, I'd like to say that I'm very happy to be here, and I'd like to commend the society for what they're doing. I attended the inaugurations recently, sat out in the rain and in the cold, and I have a cold and my right ear is stopped up. So I hope I'll talk loud enough so that you can hear what I'm saying. And if you don't hear me, just raise your hand or ask a question. You won't embarrass me, because I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm just happy to be here, happy to see you.
Thank you for those words, Uncle Brady. Now, one of the housekeeping things that you should do before you conduct an interview or before you start an interview, and please, if someone has any other things that I need to do, please feel free to yell them out. But the first thing to do is to ask the person you interview to state his full name. If you would do that.
My name is Charlie Brady Hauser, or Hauser. Is that Hauser or Hauser? I have a little story about that, but I won't tell it.
Okay. And also, if you could tell us just in a brief 2 or 3 sentences about yourself, your wife, your kids, just to share with us.
All right. I met my wife at Winston-Salem State. It's Winston-Salem Teachers College. We were classmates. We came there in 1936, and we graduated in 1940. And we got married in 1943. And so we will celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary on April the 4th, 1943. We have 2 daughters. One lives in England, and the other lives in California. And they are both graduates of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And my mother-in-law lives with us, and she has lived with us since 1952, which is quite a little while. And when we brought her to live with us, we put her on Social Security and let her work in our house. We didn't have a trouble like you have heard about recently. And she kept our children while we worked, these 2 girls, and sort of kept the house and cooked for us. And she didn't have any Social Security then. So she finally qualified for Social Security. And then she was able to retire. And she still lives with us, and she gets Social Security. And I guess we have lived in West Virginia, in South Carolina, and we live in Winston-Salem, and we have lived there since 1956. Her home is in Winston-Salem. She's a native of Winston-Salem. Okay? Don't know whether that's sufficient or not.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Now, you are a native, or you were born and raised in Yadkin County.
Yes.
Surely that would be the thing that would be most interesting to myself and also to the audience, is to know about your experiences here in Yadkin County. But we would also would like to know the things that kept you throughout your life as you moved on to other um, goals and educational goals in your life, what type of things that you carried with you throughout that time. Um,
I was born here in Yadkinville in 1917. This little house right back of where you live. I don't know whether that house is still there or not. There's a house right back of. Do you live in Old Zambles? Well, it's right. There was a house right down there in the. It's still there. Yeah. Well, that's where I was born. And I don't know. I don't remember too much about living there. My father bought a. When they built, is that the school? That's the Rosenwald School. When they built the Rosenwald School, there was an old building that they were using before they built that. And I think my father bought that building and moved it over to near the radio station where Jesse Thomas's family lives now. And he built something on to it. And that was the house that I lived in most of my time here in Yadkinville. And I left Yadkinville in 1932. So, I went to school. I went to that school. And it was a one-teacher school most of the time. And my father always said he would live near a school. He would not be a sharecropper where he had to move from place to place. He would stay near a school. And so he built that house there. And that's where we lived and where I went to school. I went to school, I guess before I was old enough to go to school. I guess I went with my brothers and sisters. There's usually 2 years between the children in my family until we got down to the youngest one, and we started coming a little more often. But I went with and I was the third child, and so I went to school with my sister and my brother when I was a little bit too young to go to school. And so my teachers, two of my teachers were former slaves. And I don't know how they got their training. But they emphasized poetry, reciting poetry and singing spirituals and things like that taught you to be a good boy. And I guess that influenced me a great deal. And so when I was in the 6th grade, I took tests that you take when you graduate from elementary school. You graduate from elementary school in the 7th grade. And so by that time, I was in the same class my brother was in. He was 2 years older than I was. And so I took the test in the 6th grade and passed it. And then I dropped out of school because my parents didn't have the money to send us away to high school because there was no high school in Yadkin County for black people. And so my sister, when she graduated, a cousin of ours in Winston-Salem let her live with them, and she went to school in Winston-Salem. And an uncle of ours lived in Lexington, and so my older brother went down there when we both finished elementary school, and he went to high school. And so they didn't have enough money to send both of us, so I didn't go. I stayed around here, worked with my parents, and made molasses, did a lot of things in the fall. And so by the next year, I was able to go. They were able to send me to school in Lexington. I boarded with a family, and then I boarded with two other families before I finally graduated from high school.
So your educational background here in Yadkin County was from probably starting school before you should have, and then finishing a year before you should have,
Should have, yes.
taking an exam. I've talked with some other people here in the county who know about that, someone that is your age, and this particular person said that you scored the highest of any student, black or white, in the county.
I learned that just recently, that I scored the highest of anyone on the test. And I was very happy to learn that, and surprised.
You mentioned some of your sisters and an uncle that helped you to attain your goals. What was some of the experiences that you remember, that you recall here in Yadkin County, um, particularly about your father? Some of the things you said that he didn't want you to sharecrop and have to go from county to county. You wanted a close-knit family here in this community. Could you share with us some of the earliest memories you have of your parents, and then maybe if you could lead in from there to your parents. Pap Alec, I think is.
Well, my father was a minister. He was a preacher. And my sister said he was a, what did they say, jack-leg preacher or jackass preacher? But he was a preacher. He was a good man. My father was a good man, and my mother was a good lady. They had good, strong, Christian, and middle-class values. And they wanted for their children things that they couldn't get for themselves. They were not able to have an education. So my father stopped in the 4th grade. But my mother, I think she went on maybe to about the 7th grade. But they wanted their children to go to school. And so my father, being a preacher, we were religious, you know. We had family prayer in the evening. We always said the Lord's Prayer at the family meal in the evening. And one of the children would lead it. We grew up at and we got away from that though. As time moved on and as I lived. I used to plow. I was the plow boy, and I was a little fella. But I could plow almost as well as a man, although I couldn't lift the plow, but I could maneuver the horses or the mule in such a way that would turn the plow so that I could plow. And I would work for Mr. Carter, Mr. Luther Carter, who was a farmer. And my Uncle Jeff, who did some nice things. And I was able to buy an old buggy from him. And we broke it down, and we used to carry it up to the hill right up where the radio station is. And we would ride down that hill all the way to the cemetery, pull it back up, and ride down. And there was a pond that was right near. I don't know whether you have heard about Rob's Pond or not, but at that time there was no electricity in Yadkinville or Yadkin County. So Rob built a pond not too far from where we were, and they generated electricity for 2 or 3 years there. And we used to slip off down there and ride in that, and swim in that lake and get a whipping for it because our parents were afraid that we would drown. And we didn't have any boat or anything, but we would take a log or a piece of plank and use it to anchor on and to ride on instead of a boat. And so that has led me, both of those things have led me to buy my own boat now, and I boat and to buy a camper, and I finally have bought a motorhome now. And I have camped all over the country and taken a lot of people with me, and children with my children, because I learned to do those things as a boy here in Yadkinville. And we always went to church and to Sunday school, and to choir rehearsal. We didn't have a piano in our church, an organ. But Uncle Jeff Uncle Jeff Russell was a person who would say do, so. He could get out the tune of a song by saying the notes to it, and he would teach the people how to sing. And so I'd go to the rehearsal. We didn't have a choir, but everybody in the audience sang. And so at the church, I went to Sunday school, and I remember big meetings ahead where you would have I guess we call them revivals now. People would come and bring their wagons, and when it would start off, they would have dinner at the church. And the baptizings were in the streams. There's no pool in the church. You go out to a stream and dam it up and baptize people there.
Where was this church located?
Same place.
Would it be the
Same place where it is now, but it has been renovated since that time.
You said that you enjoyed camping and like to board your camper. You also talk about your grandfather, Alexander, and his trips. Could you tell us
Yes.
what type of transportation you would use around that time? I guess it would be 1920 or 20 when you were about 13?
Yes, I guess so, something like that. My grandfather was born as a slave, and he was called my grandfather was born as slaves. But Ellie, the first child of Bethania, was a slave, and he was referred to as the favorite slave of his master's, favorite slave on the plantation. And he would go around with his master in the wagon, and finally, as he grew older, he became the wagon driver. Well, actually, he was one of the sons of somebody in the family. I don't know. I think both of them were. In fact, the first 3 children that my great-great-grandmother had as a slave were fathered by members of the master's family. And so Uncle Elliot, since he drove his master around, and his master was a trader, and they'd carry flour and sell it and so forth. And after slavery, he got his own wagon, and he used to go across the mountain and buy apples. He'd bring back apples and chestnuts and hazelnuts, and he'd share them with us. He'd keep them in some of them, even until Christmas time. When you go see him, he'd give them a nut or an apple that he had brought back from time to time. Some of my cousins were able to go with him across the mountains, but I was never able to go. At that time, we lived on the side of town where the radio station was, and my grandfather lived on the side of town where you live now. And so I wasn't too close to him at that time. But when we would come across town now, we would always enjoy visiting with him. And I would always want to go with him across the mountains, but I never was able to. And so that was another reason that caused me to want to camp and to buy campers and buy their boats.
From your gardening, I've reaped some of the benefits of that when you planted and given vegetables to relatives here. that seems to be a tradition of sorts that was passed on. Um,
But my mother liked to garden. She enjoyed gardening and raising vegetables and giving them to her neighbors and to her friends. And I used to help her, and then I got to gardening myself, and she would help me. And so my wife would tell me that my mother did my gardening for me. You know? That I worked her rather than doing it myself. But I have been gardening since she passed, and I'm a pretty good gardener, I think. I have a garden it's less than an acre, and that's a pretty fair garden. And I grow a number of different types of vegetables, and I share them with my friends. And I give them to the Samaritan Kitchen, which feeds the homeless. And I give some to the high-rise apartment where elderly people live. And I give some to the friends. The last time I carried somebody to my garden this fall, we were picking beans just before the frost. And the lady picked enough beans to can 32 quarts of beans out of my garden. I have eight rows of beans.
Gardening was a hobby of yours, or it still is a hobby of yours. Tell us some other hobbies and how, I think they probably could be tied to your mother's brother or some of your...
Well, I'm a beekeeper, and I used to help Miss Lily Royal. I don't know whether folks have heard of somebody named Walter Royal. He was our male carrier. And we lived not too far from him, and Mrs. Royal was a beekeeper, and I would help her with her bees. And I had a couple of uncles, an Uncle Jim, who was a beekeeper, and Uncle Sherman.
Jim Russell?
Huh?
The same Jim Russell?
No, these are Hausers.
Oh, okay.
He left here and went to New York. He was a blacksmith here. And the uncle in Winston-Salem was a beekeeper. So some bees came into my neighbor's yard several years ago, and so I got my uncle to help me to get those bees, and I've been a beekeeper ever since.
That uncle would be Sherman Hauser.
That's right. And so I get honey, and I don't sell honey, but I give honey to people. And I eat honey every day. I sweeten my coffee with honey. And I put honey on my bread also.
Before we move on to, I'd like for you to share some of your experiences that happened after you moved from here, but after you moved from Yankton County and went on to pursue further educational goals. But another thing you mentioned about the house that you lived in, there were some things you said about remembering on the wall of the house that you lived in over by the radio station that your father did.
Yes. I remember on that wall, there was a poster that said, character is higher than intellect. And that has stuck with me all of my life. You know. I always think of that. And I'm sure it has made me a better person than I would have had I not had that. In addition to all the other things too. But that certainly stuck with me. My father always said, we are all children of a heavenly Father. All of us. White and black. And he emphasized that. And he emphasized that the body was a temple for the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. And that we ought to take care of our bodies and he took care of his body too. He did not. He was sickly. He claimed he was sickly as a child, and he would not go out in the bad weather and do things that were detrimental to his health. And I hope I'm doing some things. I'm 75, and I guess I have been blessed health-wise and blessed other-wise.
I have one more thing that you made mention of, buying land. You felt that was something that your
My
family
father
was-
always said that they aren't making any more land. I always remember him saying that. And he encouraged you to buy some land. Buy some land. And so I have been able to do that. Buy a little land. Don't do too much with it, except my garden. But I have some in Forsyth County. I tried to give it away to Winston-Salem State, but they haven't taken it yet. I'm gonna give it to my church if they don't finally accept it, because there's some legal things involved in taking care of it.
Well, before Winston-Salem State, you lived in Lexington. And going to school is always good when you have your parents there to push you and motivate you and support you. Were there relatives? You said there were people there in Lexington.
Well, that uncle didn't live in Lexington, but 1 year. He was gone when I came there. He was there when my brother went there. So we met other people there, and the two of us stayed with an old lady. And that's my first year. And then the next year we stayed with another family. And the man liked me very much. There were about 4 of us staying there. Some people from Statesville, other places. He called me his pig, which I was, and he encouraged me. And a friend who would come by to visit fell in love with me. He liked me very much. So he told me, he said, I'm going to take you to my house. And so the next year, I went and lived with this family, and he didn't charge me a penny. Other places we had to pay and take vegetables, do this and that. But this family let me live with them without paying. He was a cement contractor. It was during the Depression. Things were pretty rough. I would go help with the cement finishing, things that I could do. And also, we would saw wood and split it up and put it in bags and bring it over here to Winston-Salem and sell it on Saturdays. And sometimes that was all the only money that came into the family, what we did selling that wood. So I was family. I felt just like family to them, and a lot of them are dead now. But I go to Lexington every once in a while. I went to that. Almost this month of the last of January to see one of the girls named Sissy. She always says, "That's my brother," and I feel, like that I am their brother because they helped me to get through school.
When you said the family, that was the family here in Yadkin County, your
Which one?
parents. When you said that you worked in Lexington and you would send the money back, that was to your parents?
No. When I was with the Millers in Lexington, I worked with, he was a cement contractor. So I would help him to do the things that he had to do the work, the cement finishing that had to be done. But it was during the Depression, and sometimes there wasn't nothing to do. So in order to supplement that family, we would cut that wood and saw it up and bring it to Winston to sell it. And then I didn't. When I got the money, we gave it to the father. I didn't get any of that.
Okay.
I was a paper boy. the money that I got for my own to spend was from carrying papers, and people didn't pay me, like they should have. And when I didn't get paid, when people didn't pay me, I didn't have much. But I carried papers to have the spending money that I had, and I had very little of it.
The next progression would lead to Winston-Salem State, where you attended.
Well, after I graduated from high school, I stayed around for a while. I didn't know what I was going to do. And so one day I mowed a whole field of hay down over in the meadow over there next to, not too far from where the water plant is now, right down there. And while I was mowing, I said, I'm going to go to college. And next day I left that hay right there. My father wasn't too well. But I left that hay there and went down to Winston-Salem State, and I had $5 in my pocket. And I said, I'm going to try to go to school. And I went and talked to the business manager. And he talked all kind of trash to me. And I went on out there on the campus, and I saw another fella who was working on the campus. This was during the summertime when school was out, and there weren't too many people around. But this fella had come there just like I did, and he was unloading coal. And I told him the experience that I had had with the business manager, and he told me, so he just talks trash, You go talk to him some more. And so I did. I talked to him some more, and he gave me a job. And I came about 3 weeks before school started, and worked. And I worked at Winston-Salem Teachers College. I worked at Winston-Salem Teachers College all the time while I was in school, summer and winter, working on the campus, and working in the dormitories, and doing things for the schools, earning my money. And I finally got fired. My uncle fired me. My uncle was my supervisor. And he was supervisor of all the boys who were. And so one day the president of the college told all the boys on the campus, and there weren't but about 20 of us, to go do something. And when we got there, my uncle dismissed everybody except me and another boy. And it was on Sunday. Told us to do it. So we dismissed ourselves. And my uncle fired me. So I had to go back to this same businessman. And he talked trash to me, and I thought I was going to have to leave school. But finally he hired me again. He hired me. And I worked for my uncle again. And I think he worked me to death after that. So one day I was out there working on the campus, and the Western Union boy came by to deliver hay. Well, in the meantime, while I was fired, I found a typewriter in an old building. And I taught myself to type. I learned the keyboard and learned how to type. So while I was out there working on that campus, when the Western Union boy came, he had a telegram for the registrar. But the registrar had gone to dinner. So I signed for her. And then when she came back, I carried it in to her. And I asked her to give me a job. And she was happy to give me a job because I could type. And I was a sophomore, and I was well known on the campus. I was a good student, and I was morally a good student also. And so she gave me a job in the registrar's office. For the last 2 years while I was in college, I worked in the registrar's office. But my uncle, he didn't like that at all, and he spent a couple of weeks trying to get me back to work with him. It took took the best man he had, because I was the best worker that he had. Dependable worker, to do the things that needed to be done. But I stayed in the registrar's office. And my uncle and I we were good friends. But I just thought he was a little bit too hard on that. And I guess it might have been good for me. Some of the things might have been good for me.
That uncle was Malia
That,
Hauser.
yes, he was the superintendent of buildings and grounds and the electrician at Winston-Salem Teachers College. And he also had taught some, and he was graduate of the college too. He graduated some other things.
Um, if there aren't any other experiences that you'd like to share with us at Winston-Salem State, what about once you moved on to achieve other, your masters, your doctorates? What experiences would you like to share with us there?
Well, when I graduated high school, I was valedictorian of my class, and when I graduated from college, I had the highest average of anybody in my class who had come there, who had spent just 4 years there. So, and I was also named the most likely person to succeed in my class. And when I graduated, I think I gave the college $25 in cash while I was there. And I owed them $33 when I graduated. I had worked all of my bills out while I was there working. I don't know what else did you ask me to say?
Well, we were talking about the determination that you probably got from growing up here and
Well, I guess
overcoming obstacles.
I guess my favorite role model was my father's brother, Prather J. Hauser. He went to Winston-Salem Teachers College, which was Slater when he went there, and then he left and graduated from Wilberforce College and from Springfield College, and was an executive secretary of YMCA. He was my role model. He inspired me to want to be something also. And my mother's brother, this Moya, he was an inspiration to me too. And I wanted to be like them. I wanted to exceed them. So all of those things, the church and my family, my parents, my mother and father, where they emphasized education. Those are the things that kept me wanting to go. And I saw someplace that unless a person is manifestly deficient, he can do anything he wants to do. Because most people don't use or develop more than about 10% of their ability. There's plenty potential that people have that they don't develop and use. And actually, if we would put our minds to it, and children, if they put their minds to it, they could be about anything they wanted to be. And so that stuck with me, and I could tell my students from time to time, you want to be something you can be it. You have the ability to be it if you would just put your mind to it and do it. Because none of you are just so deficient until you can't dress yourself and do things like that. So you can achieve if you want to.
Oh, is there anything else? You talked at length about, when we talked prior to this, about your experience in the Army. I think even there was an article in the Yak and Ripple last year that talked about how.
Well, I, uh, I believe I'd like to talk about something else before I talk about that.
Okay.
My parents, I meant to say something about them that I didn't mention. My parents always wanted to help somebody. You know, they would help somebody. When the preacher came to town, he stayed at our house. My parents, there was a lady who was in the poor folks' home, blind poor. I don't know. I know some people have heard of her. She got in trouble down there. She hit somebody. She grew up down in that poor folks' home and lived there all of her life. And so she got into some difficulty and hit somebody, and they put her in jail. My father got her out of jail, and then he carried her into our home, and she lived there for a number of years until she finally went and lived with her brother. My parents, they kept my mother's sister in our house, and they kept another mother's sister in our house, and they kept my father's brother's children in our house and let them grow up. So my parents were caring parents. They wanted to do something for other people, and a number of the things that I have done is because I learned that from them, and I have done a number of things for people, you know. And I did because I think that's what you all do.
Yeah, that would explain why you're on the nursing home advisory board.
Oh yes, I have been associated with a number of organizations. I'm on the American Heart Association's board now, the Hearts Council board, and I'm on the nursing home advisory board, and I go around to nursing homes to see that the patients are treated properly, that they live in dignity, and that patients' rights are being respected. Now, when you talk about in the Army, when I was in the Army, I wanted to be. I enlisted in the Army. I was teaching at the time, and I was about to be drafted, so I enlisted, and I wanted to be an officer. I wanted to be an officer in the Army, but I worked at it pretty hard. My sister, who lives here, lived in Washington and helped me to try to pull some strings to get to be an officer. Because at that time, you know, blacks taught it pretty rough. And my major said that no persons in his battalion would ever become an officer. And I said, I'm going to prove that I'm going to become an officer. But I didn't become an officer. I was finally given the test that you are supposed to take in order to qualify to be selected to go to officers training school and to be an officer. And I went before boards, and I was rejected the first time because the people asked me some questions. That I was out on maneuvers, asked me questions about current events, and here I'm in the woods, and couldn't know some of the things that they asked me. But finally, when I got to Fort Sill, I was given another, all of us were given another test. And my test score was 131. In order to go to OCS, you had to have a test score of at least 110. So I was at Fort Sill, I had more success in being selected to go to OCS. But I was never selected. So I inquired as to why I was not selected, and then I was finally told that your outfit has been alerted to go overseas, and the enlisted men in the outfit are frozen, so you can't go. So I had to go overseas. I went overseas and I served. And then I said, well, I'm going to try to become a warrant officer because there's so much prejudice in selecting when you go before boards and so forth. When you select people and being black, you aren't selected. So I said, I'm going to try to become a warrant officer. Take a test for that. So I took the test, and I passed the test. And I was selected a couple of times to become a warrant officer. I'm sure when they selected me, they didn't know that I was black. But the first time I was supposed to report to an outfit, it had left the continent, and so I didn't get to go. The next time I was selected, I went to a battalion in Weimar, Germany. And when I got there, the major wouldn't even talk to me. But one of his enlisted men talked to me. They were all white. And he told me, said the major said he wouldn't have a nigger in his outfit. So I was never able to become an officer or an enlisted. And so you want to know what was one of my disappointments? That was one of my disappointments, that I was not able to. But the attitude that I took to it was that all things work together for good for those that love the Lord. Because if I had gotten up with that outfit, I would have gone to the South Pacific, and chances are I'd have gotten killed. And maybe the same thing could have happened with the other outfits, So I said, well, it was good that made a difference.
One thing that impresses me about that is that from other experiences, you didn't seem to be angry about it.
No.
You used it to your advantage. You would try, an obstacle would be there, but you couldn't make officers training, so you would try something else. And that seems to be a theme that continues throughout your life.
Right.
Is there anything else you'd
Well,
like to share?
another disappointment was when I was a principal in South Carolina, and I was working on my doctor's degree, and I'd finished all of my requirements, and the chairman of my committee came down to visit me and to visit my superintendent, and spent time visiting them in the school and so forth. And I learned that my superintendent was not going to recommend me. I had been a little bit too radical and too active. It was in 1954, 55, just before Brown versus Board of Education was handled, And so my superintendent would not recommend me. So I had rented my robe and everything to get my degree, everything. So that was it. So I sent in my resignation to the superintendent, and Jack Adkins from here recommended me for a job at Allen University teaching, and so I worked down there for a year. But when I worked a half a year, they recommended me, and I got my degree. Instead of getting my degree in 55, I got it in 56.
What was your degree in?
The elementary principal was my degree. But the attitude that I took was, well, I had a cross burned on my school ground. Well, it wasn't a cross. It was something burned there. I guess they're telling me that I was involved in things maybe that I shouldn't. remember we brought Thurgood Marshall down there to speak to us. And Thurgood Marshall retired recently, who later became Supreme Court Justice. So, the attitude that I took toward that was that if I had stayed in Spartanburg, South Carolina, I might have gotten killed. So my attitude was all things work together for the good, and it didn't bother me too much, and I went right on from there. Yes.
Could you tell us the story about being arrested for riding the bus over in Mount Airy?
In 1947, I was teaching at West Virginia State, and I got on the bus in Winston-Salem, and I got about a third row from the back and sat down. And there weren't too many people in the bus, but as we went on up the road, more and more people got on, and I was on the seat by myself. So a young man sat down, white fellow sat down beside me. He stood up beside me for a while. And then he finally sat down. And when I got to Mount Airy, the driver asked me to move to the rear of the bus, and I wouldn't do it. I told him that I was an interstate passenger, and that interstate passengers were not subject to North Carolina's Jim Crow law. And so when he got to Mount Airy, they held the bus up for about 2 hours and trying to persuade me to go to the back. And some people said they were going to throw me off if I didn't go to the back. But finally they arrested me. I did not go to the back, and they arrested me and put me in jail I stayed in jail about 2 hours before someone could come and get me out of jail from Winston-Salem. And so the people in Mount Airy would not arrest me. Because after I told them that I was an interstate passenger and that I wasn't subject to their laws, they wouldn't arrest me. So the bus company told the driver, take all steps to get him off. So the bus driver swore out the warrant for me and had me arrested. And when I came back for trial, the judge threw it out of court because he said that, and I had a black lawyer up there. I guess the first black lawyer that had been in the courtroom in Mount Airy. And the judge said, he said, when I took this office, I took an oath that I was going to uphold the laws of the United States. And so he threw it out. And so I was going to sue the bus company. But the bus company gave me $2,000 not to sue me. And so I'm going to come.
Thank you.
I think you also donated some of that money to the church here.
Oh, yes. I gave the church down there $100 out of that $2,000. And I think it's the first time anybody had ever given them $100 at one time.
What are some of the courses you've taught over your long career?
Oh, I taught courses in foundations of education, historical, sociological, psychological foundations of education. And I taught method courses. And I taught school community relations. And I supervised student teachers. And I was the chairman of the department for 9 years. Didn't do too much teaching.
Department at Winston State.
Yeah, at Winston-Salem. Well, I taught at Winston-Salem State, West Virginia State, and at Allen University at the college level. And in the elementary schools, I taught at 14th Street in Winston-Salem, and I was a principal in Spartan, South Carolina.
Are there any other questions for me? question about, I guess it's always fitting when you close to ask, despite the fact that you're still active, very active in Forsyth County, doing a lot of things. What would you share? What would you like people to remember you today? How would you like people to remember you?
Well, I would like for people to remember me as a person who did what he thought was right. And sometimes being an administrator and a teacher, when you do what you think is right, people don't love you too much, but they respect you. And so I would like for people to remember me as a person who strives to do what is right and strives to help people. And I have helped people, and I'm trying to help my grandchildren now. People help me. I'm very grateful to the United States for the GI Bill of Rights. You know, I was able to get my master's degree and my doctor's degree because I was a veteran and eligible for the GI Bill of Rights. And so I wanted to help other people, and I have helped, and I've been helped by my parents and my sister Beulah, Mrs. Christian, who lives here in Jacksonville. And so I have helped a brother and a sister who were in college, and then I had one of my sisters to come and live with us and go to high school. And I am trying now to get some funds together for my grandchildren. I'm buying buns and I have a CD. I bought some stock so that when they get ready to go to college or get ready to buy a home, they will have what an aunt of mine says, a little nest egg, so that they won't have it as hard as I had it, and some of my brothers and sisters had.
Another question?
Yes.
What kind of inspiration can you give to young black men today?
Well,
Like my boy, 12 years old.
I can tell him that he can be anything he wants to if he is not manifestly deficient. He has the ability to become anything that he wants to if he will work. You know, if he will put his mind to it, and somebody will help him. Somebody will help him. And I think if you have a feeling of self-worth, and I think that is a part of it. I believe my grandfather felt that, you know, he had a feeling of self-worth. You know, the slave master said he's his favorite slave. He's come back. And my parents thought that their children were somebody. And I think if you encourage him, let him know that have a positive self-image, that he can, and if he will put his mind to it, he can become anything he wants to. Yes.
Do you remember the names of the teachers that you had? You said were slaves.
Farmers Way. Mr. Husband and Pete Harris. Huh?
That's a little before
Oh,
the
yeah.
time I was in.
Pete Harris. He was born a slave, and he was a good teacher. Emphasized moral things, you know. Let me live in my house by the side of the road where the race of men go by. You know, poems like that, you know.
Was this at the Yankton School?
Beg pardon?
At the Yankton School,
Yes.
did you ever have any women teachers?
Oh, yes. I had two or three women. And my teacher now is in the hospital. She was Oressa Harris and married a Hauser. And she's in hospital. She is a very good friend of mine, and I'm one of her favorite students. And she, we have in the garden. She gets seeds, and encourages people to plant gardens. And I carry the vegetables to older people in the community. That's what I do that's one thing that I do during the summer. But she told me now that she's not going to work with the gardens this year. She's actually too old. But I will still be gardening. But I'll have to buy my own seeds. But these seeds were given to her by programs, that encourage people to plant gardens and other folks to plant gardens and give to people.
Okay. If there aren't any other questions, I'd like you to join me in giving Raphael Hauser a hand.
Well, I enjoyed
Appreciate you opening up your personal diary of sorts and sharing it with us today. So,
Well, I think I've had a good life. I have 5 interesting hobbies: beekeeping, and boating, camping, and I'm a photographer, and I guess a freelance writer. I know I have written hundreds of articles for people who do things, and they want me to take that picture. They think I belong to the Chronicle. And I had 3 articles in the Chronicle this week for people who have done something. Somebody was given an award by the Family Servant, or she remember award. Urban League gave an award. My church, somebody retired after serving as a pianist for 16 years. Picture. And I also had a little article that was not in the paper on Winston-Salem State's trouble over there with big house gains. But I don't know I doubt that it'll be in the paper. Because it's controversial, and my wife didn't want me to send it. I don't know whether you know about what's happening at Winston-Salem State. Mr. Gaines, the big house Gaines, has been the coach over there for 47 years. And the state of North Carolina says you got to retire when you get 70. And he didn't want to retire. And I thought he should retire. My wife said, you got no business getting into it. But finally, he decided to retire. And they had something for him last night, the last game that was played, that he will coach. His last home game was last night. They gave him kind of honors. But I don't think my article will be published. Because since he has retired now, they'll say that is stirring in mess.
He cannot finish out the season?
Big one.
Will he be able
Oh,
to-
yes. He will be able to finish out the season. And they're going to give him a job as in development. Well, see, he should have retired 2 or 3 years ago. He hasn't won anything. But he's a good man. I mean, he has won a lot of things. Won 820-some games. Most active winning coach that there is right now. But when your time has passed, you ought to step down and let some young people get a job, And that's what I felt. And my wife said, you don't have anything. But I'm a graduate of Winston-Salem State, and Winston-Salem State has been good to me. They made me professor emeritus when I retired. They gave me an honorary doctorate degree a couple of years ago, since I've been retired. And they let me go to school there. And I love it. And I think that I ought to come to their defense. And Gaines has been good to me too. Gaines has been good. He taught me how to make pictures and taught me how to write articles, because I was sports information director at the college. And the college inducted me into its Hall of Fame. So the college has been real good.
Coach Gaines was your campus campaign director.
Oh, yeah, and when I went to the General Assembly, Gaines was my treasurer. No, he was my treasurer. And he gave me $100 a couple of times on my campaign. So I love him. But he needs to step down.
Okay, well, at this time we'll adjourn, and if, please, you can have refreshments, and feel free. Uncle Brady loves to talk, and he has a lot of stories.
No, I don't love to talk.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Got a little tape here, so I'm gonna flick it off, and I'll make copies.
Huh? Okay, make a picture with me.
This is my brother.
It is? Okay.
Come on, Harold, I didn't tell her we could move.
Oh, well,
Come on back,
I wanted
Harold.
to make sure you got this on tape.
Let me rose between two thorns.
I want. Yeah, I got it in here. I want to get a picture too. I'll get a picture of you and Mr. Mack.
Oh, please.